In this chapter, we'll be creating the final hood object. So this is our guide mesh right here. So let's actually rename this so we know what it is. Let me press the N key for the right side toolbar. And in the item field here, let's rename this to guide-body. And I'll press N again to get rid of that. And let's increase the subdivision levels to 4. Our guide mesh should always be 2 subdivision levels above the mesh that we shrink wrap on top of it. And I explain why in the intro section on the shrink wrap modifier. So the final hood object we'll be working with will have a subsurf level of 2. All right, so let's move this to the last layer. So I'll press the M key. I'll move that to the bottom last layer right there. And let's press number 2 on the number row. Select our hood object here, then press the M key to move it, and we'll move it to layer 1. Now let's press 1 on the number row to go to layer 1. So we've got this object that we duplicated earlier on, and this is what we'll use to carve out some details and create the final hood. Now before we start modifying this, we're going to shrink wrap this on top of the guide mesh. So let's click on Add Modifier, add in a shrink wrap, click on the target field and choose Guide Body. Now we're going to leave that after the subsurf modifier because we want to take the subsurf geometry and shrink wrap that on top of our guide mesh. That makes sure we get the most perfect curves possible. So now we press numpad 7 for top view and let's start editing the shape of the hood to better match the blueprints. For example, up here, you can see we have a smooth curve right there, whereas in the blueprints, it's kind of a sharp angle there. So let me press tab to go into edit mode, and let's add some extra loop cuts here. So I'll press Control and R right through there, and left click, and I'll drag that over to right there. And let's add one on the other side as well. So that sharpens up that corner for us, and our curvature there is still nice and smooth. In fact, let me press the N key, and I'll go into the matte cap menu and select the silver one, just so we can better see any creasing. Sometimes, I don't know, I switch back and forth. Sometimes the silver one is actually more useful. So let me just show you real quick the difference the shrink wrap modifier made. If I turn off visibility of the shrink wrap modifier, you see that those 3 edge loops right next to each other create that crease right there down the middle. But if we turn shrink wrap on, it's taking the subsurf geometry, shrink wrapping it on top of our guide mesh, which is nice and smooth there. And so not only do we get that sharp corner shape right there, but we get the smooth, perfect curvature of the guide mesh as well. So that's generally how the shrink wrap modifier works. It's just that easy. Now let me go back into edit mode and let's fix a couple other areas. Like right up here, we not only need to sharpen that corner up there, but there's also a slightly sharper edge, right, or sharper corner right there than we have. We have a very smooth, consistent curve right there. So let me press Control and R right through there to add a loop cut. Left click and I'll drag that up to there. That extra geometry is going to help us sharpen that edge right there. However, I don't like that these 2 edge loops are so close together. So what I'm going to do is press B. I'll middle click and drag over that and deselect it. And then I'll press G twice to slide this to the middle like that. The more spaced out your geometry is, the better it's going to shrink wrap onto your guide mesh. That's just a general rule. All right, now let's sharpen up these corners. So let me press Control and R right through there. Left click and press E, then F to align it with the top edges. And we'll slide that to about right there. And we'll do the same thing on the right side. So let me press Control and R over here. Left click, press E to align it with the right side, and we'll slide that to the same distance away from the edge that the top edge loop was. So right there looks good. And let's go down to the bottom, and we'll sharpen this corner up down here as well. So let me press Control and R right there. Left click, and then press E. And we'll slide that down to right there. So that corner sharpened up, top corner sharpened up. And in fact, we could add an extra edge loop right through here because it looks like our mesh is overlapping the blueprints there. So let me press Control and R through there. Left click, then right click to keep it in the middle. Press A to deselect everything, and then I'll select these 2. Press G and then Y, and I'll slide them down to match the blueprints. Let me do the same thing with these 2. All right, that's a better shape there now. Cool. All right, now let me select that, and I'll press numpad 7 for top view, and I'll press tab to go into edit mode. Now what we're going to do is push around some of these vertices to surround the shape of the vent right here. So let me select those 2 vertices first. I'll press G twice, and then I'll hold Shift for small movements, and I'll move that right on top of the blueprint line right like that. And I'll do the same thing for the vertices next to it. And these vertices here, I'm going to move to the middle of the vent. So we'll leave them there for now. Let me select these 2. I'll press G twice and slide them into place. And the same with the vertices next to that. Now I don't know how much we actually have to move these, but I figure we'll just center them anyway just in case it actually has an impact. So let me just start with these two. I'll press G twice, put them in the middle. Same thing with that. And same thing with these. Now these probably matter over there because they're going to help shape the corners like right there and right there. All right, that looks good. So the spacing right here is a little bit larger than right there. We've got the shrink wrap modifier active, and actually let's turn the visibility of that off just so editing moves a little bit faster. It was a little bit sluggish for me. All right, so what was I saying? Right, we got the shrink wrap. Got the shrink wrap modifier taking care of the curvatures, but it's still good to space out the vertices as best as you can to help the shrink wrap modifier out and give you the best possible results. So let me select all these vertices and I'll press G twice to slide them down. Let me deselect those and I'll slide these down and I'll slide that down a little bit. And that looks a little bit better. Let me slide these down just a touch as well. And that definitely looks like it's all spaced out better now. And the same thing down here. Let me select those and press G twice to slide them down into the middle. And same with that and these. And there we go. Cool. All right, now what we're going to do is add some edge loops right through here. So we can actually create, well, let's get a look at the hood first. That might help. So we've got these bevels that kind of just cut into that area, and then we have the hole for the vent. So we're going to work on adding some edge loops for the bevels now. The only problem is when I press Control and R to add an edge loop through there, you can see it adds it all the way down. And the same thing, to add one across, it's going to go all the way across. I don't want that, so what I'm going to do is select those vertices and those, and I'll press H to hide them. That way when I add an edge loop through there, it's going to stop right at that edge. So let's start with a horizontal edge loop. I'll press Control and R right through there. Left click and I'll drag that down to match up with the bottom line on the blueprints right there. And let's add a vertical edge loop now. So I'll press Control and R again, left click there and drag it to the right. Now we're going to have to do some reshaping of this. I'm going to drop it in that general area. And let's take care of this corner right now. I don't want these extra edge loops or these extra vertices hanging on the edge right there. So I'm going to slide them over to merge with these. So let me go down here and I'll turn on this option for auto merge. And let me select that vertex. I'll press G twice, slide all the way to the right, then left click, and that'll merge together. And then I'll select these three, press G twice, slide them down all the way, left click, and they'll merge together. So now we have these quads here wrapping around and everything is nice and clean. Now let me make sure we turn off auto merge, else that's going to cause some trouble for us. And now what we're going to do is play that all too familiar game of matching up vertices with the blueprints. So let me start with that vertex. I'll press G twice and I'll slide to the right over the blueprints like that. And this vertex is in a good spot actually. Now select this one, press G twice, and the lines don't really match up there, so I'm going to kind of just toss it in the middle. Yeah, it should be fine. And let me select this one, and then we'll do the same thing all the way up. Let's match them to the blueprints now though. It's getting a little tight up here, so I think I'll select the remaining vertices, press G twice, slide all the way to the right so that it's snug up against the other edge loop. And that should be fine. Maybe a little bit tighter up there. All right, that looks good. And let me select that vertex. Let's get that back on the blueprint line. That moved over a little bit too much. And cool, I think that does it. Now let's press Alt and H to unhide those vertices. And just as a precaution, what I think we're going to do now is apply the shrink wrap modifier. The reason I'm going to do that is because we've been moving some vertices around, and it's always good practice to make sure that your base mesh vertices are flush up against your guide mesh surface. So now I'll tab out of edit mode, and I'll re-enable visibility of the shrink wrap modifier. I'll copy it, and then I'll apply one of them. So now all the vertices are flush up against the guide mesh surface, and that's all there is to it. So let me press tab to go back into edit mode, and I'll press numpad 7 for top view. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take these edge loops here, and we're going to go into front view and we're going to pull them down to create this inset area with the nice beveled edges. All right, let's take a look at our reference picture. And here's the bevel we'll be trying to achieve. And it stops right about there, I guess, and it flattens out there, it looks like. So we'll keep that in mind. Let me slide that over. And just for right now, let's turn off visibility of the shrink wrap modifier so things work a little faster. And let's hold Alt and right click on that edge loop right there. We'll start off with this one. And let me press Control and up for full screen. And I'll go into top view by pressing numpad 7. So we want that to stop, I guess, right about here. So what I'll do is I'll press B and I'll middle click and drag over all those vertices to deselect them. Then I'll hold Shift and right click on that one again to reselect it and make it the active selection. So now we can scale away from that selection as long as we have the pivot point set to active element. And let's remember which vertex that is. So it starts right here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. Okay. Let's press numpad 1 to go into front view. And now we'll just scale away from that vertex, and all of the vertices should fall on the blueprint line when we scale down. So let me press S and then Z. And great, I can't see anything. Let's turn off limit selection to visible, which is that icon in the header there. Now let's press S and then Z. Scale that down until the vertices are aligned on those blueprints, just like that. And we'll do the same thing for the edge loops next to that. So let me hold Alt, I'll right click on that edge loop there, and let's press numpad 7 for top view. Let me deselect those bottom vertices there, because we want just the vertices within the depression area there. And this begins dipping down where? I think this one right here is the 5th one. So let me press B, middle click and drag to deselect them, and then reselect that one to make it the active selection. Let's press numpad 1 for front view. And now what we'll do is align the edges along this line on the blueprints here. So this vertex has to come down to right there. So I'll press S and then Z, get it right on that line, just like that, and left click. And we'll do the same thing for the last 2 edge loops. So let me hold Alt, right click on that, then hold Alt and Shift, right click on that. And we'll deselect the bottom vertices and deselect the top ones, but then we'll hold Shift and we'll reselect those 2. Now let's press numpad 1 for front view. And again, we're going to line it up with this blueprint line. So I'll press S and then Z and bring it to right there. Awesome. Now let me hold Alt and right click on that edge loop right there. We need to straighten this out. And I think this vertex over there is a more accurate positioning. So what I'll do is select this one, press G and then Z, and I'll move it up until it's straight, but then I'll move it up a tiny bit more so that it slants up ever so gently. Just like this line right here does. We're trying to match this. So let me select those 2 vertices now. I'll press G and then Z, move that up, have it slant just a tiny bit upward. All right, that's good enough. The reason I wanted them both straight is because that is actually the outline of the hole we're cutting out. So we want it to be consistent with each other. All right, cool. It's a good start on that. All right, now what we'll do is add some extra edge loops to start defining the bevel. So let me rotate the view. I'll press Control and R right through there, left click, and I'll drag that up to the top to right there. Same distance away from the middle edge loop as this one is here. And do the same thing at the bottom. All right, cool. That's looking good. And I think we're going to need an extra edge loop right above here because we have one on the inside, but we don't have one on the outside. So that bevel is not being sharpened as much as the ones on the side over here. So let me press Control and R right through there, left click, and I'll drag that to right there to sharpen that up. Nice. Now if we press numpad 7 for top view, you can see that our pocket here is a lot more round than the pocket in the blueprints. So let's add a couple extra edge loops to redefine that. Let me press Control and R right through there, left click, and I'll drag that down to about right there. And we'll add a vertical one as well. And we'll drag it over there until the shape of our pocket matches up with the blueprints. Sweet. Now you can see we've got some creasing problems created by adding those extra edge loops in there. And that's easily fixed with the shrink wrap modifier though. Let's press Control and up arrow to get out of full screen. And what I'll do now is click on the eye icon to re-enable visibility of that, but it shrink wraps the entire hood back onto the guide mesh. So let me press tab to go back into edit mode. What we're going to do is just place all the vertices outside of this zone right here into a vertex group targeted by the shrink wrap modifier. So let me zoom in. And a quick way to do this is just to hold Alt, right click on that edge loop there inside the bevel, and then I'll press H to hide it. That separates these 2 sides from each other. Now we can hover over these vertices and press the L key to select them all. Now let's go over to the object data buttons, click on the plus sign to add a new vertex group, and then click on Assign. Now let's go back to the modifier buttons, click on the vertex group field and choose group. And there we go. Let's press Alt and H to unhide those other vertices. Press Tab to get out of edit mode, and you can see what we've got so far. It's not looking bad. However, up here you can see our crease from the bevel is going all the way up. And let's fix that by pressing A to deselect everything. And where did it start dropping down? Right here. So let me press B, and I'll left click and drag over all those vertices. Go back over to the object data buttons and click on Assign. Press Tab to get out of edit mode, and there we go. Cool. We have a little issue with the bevel shading right in there. You can see it kind of dips down right there. Let me get a better view. There we go. Kind of dips down right there and then goes down. We're going to fix that in a minute. I'm just making sure all the shading everywhere else is how I want it to be. And yeah, it looks good so far. Now again, it's always good practice to space out your geometry on curved surfaces. And we've got these two edge loops right here that are really close together. So let me hold Alt and right click on that to select it. Then I'll press B and middle click and drag over those to deselect them. Now I'll simply press G twice. I'll slide that down to the middle of that area right there. Things are moving slightly sluggish for me, so I'm going to go over to the modifiers and disable visibility of the shrink wrap modifier for now. Alright, so now we can start creating the gap, the actual gap for the vent. So I'll press numpad 7 for top view, and let's delete all the vertices on the inside of that area. So I'll press A to deselect everything, then I'll press the C key for circle select. I'll use the scroll wheel to make that radius bigger. Then I'll just left click and drag over all those vertices. Then press X, and we'll delete those vertices. Now we just need to sharpen up this corner up here a little bit. So I'll press Ctrl and R to add a loop cut through there. I'll left click and I'll drag that up to about right there. I don't want to move these two edge loops too close to each other because that might create a dent in that area because it does have a curvature. Let's space out the vertices up here too. So I'll press B, middle click and drag over them to deselect, then press G twice and slide them down. And while we're at it, let's slide these vertices right here up a little. So I'll press A to deselect, press B, left click and drag over them, then I'll press G twice and slide them up a little bit. Now let's press Tab to get out of edit mode and re-enable visibility of the shrink wrap modifier and see what we're working with now. So we just have one last problem to fix, and that's the shading in the bevel area right there. If you go into wireframe, you can see what's going on there. When I turn shrink wrap on and off, you can see some of the vertices are moving, and those are the ones that are actually being shrink wrapped, but then these on the bevel aren't moving. They're not being shrink wrapped to anything. So because these ones are moving, it gives us this angle change right here, which is creating that little dent. So what we'll do is just create a duplicate of this, and then we'll apply all the modifiers for this and edit it in high poly in order to smooth that area out. So let's go over here. Actually, let's duplicate it first. So with that object selected, I'll press Shift and D to duplicate it and right click to keep that in place. And let's press H to hide that for now. Now let's reselect that, and I'll press the N key for the right side toolbar. And let's scroll to, where's it at? The item name right here. So let's change the object name to guide-hood. I'll press N again to get rid of that. And now let's apply the modifier. So I'll apply the mirror modifier, apply subsurf at level 2, make sure the view level is set to 2, and then apply the shrink wrap modifier. So now if you go in edit mode, you can see we're dealing with a high poly mesh now. And let's actually add back in a mirror modifier, but we'll delete the left half first. So let me press numpad 1 for front view. And I'll hold Alt, right click on that edge loop, hold Alt and Shift and right click on that one. And those are the two to the left of the very middle one. And then I'll press X and delete the vertices. Then hover over the left side vertices and press the L key to select them all. Then you can press X and delete them. Then go back over to the modifiers and add in a mirror modifier. And there we go. Now this guide mesh here is essentially at subsurf level 2 already because that's what we applied it at. But like I mentioned before, our guide meshes should be 2 subsurf levels higher than the meshes we shrink wrap on top of them. So let's go over here and add a new subsurf modifier, and we'll increase that view level to level 2. So this is essentially at level 4 now. But we'll also make that invisible for right now so we can work with editing it and not have it be so sluggish. So now we can start working on this area in here. Now we can start deleting some edge loops. So we'll start from the bottom, but I'll keep the bottom 3 or 4 intact because they kind of serve to shape the bottom of the bevel area. So let's see, I'll leave that one, and that one. But I'll delete this one. So I'll hold Alt and right click on that edge loop, then press X and erase the edge loop. And I'll continue doing that all the way up to where it stops being weird. Let's delete one more. Cool. All right, so I deleted all the edge loops up to there. Now we no longer have that weird dip there. And let me turn on the red matte cap. So I'll press the N key for the right side toolbar. Click on the matte cap menu, then click on red. Let me press Control and up for full screen. I'll press Tab to get out of edit mode, and let's see how the reflections look. Looking better. It gets a little bit weird in this area because I need to add a couple more edge loops toward the bottom. But that weird dip is gone at the top of the bevel. Now, because we changed the surface of the bevel, we have this slight problem at the bottom there. We changed the surface of this area right here, but we didn't change the bottom there. So there is a slight change in direction. It's very slight. We probably don't even have to fix it, but I'll show you how to fix it real quick. And we're basically just going to add those edge loops back in. But I don't want to have to delete the edge loops all the way up because it looks good in the upper area. So what I'll do is start right there. I'm going to stay away from the corner vertices, but I'll start right here. I'll select those two vertices. I'll press X and I'll dissolve them. Then I'll select that vertex, hold Shift and select that one, and press the J key to create an edge between them. And now let me hold Alt, I'll right click on that edge loop, press X, and delete the edge loop. I'll do the same thing for the one beneath it. So now all the shading looks great in this area. There's no weird issue at the bottom. Now we just need to add back in two edge loops to connect to these ones over here. So let me press Control and R right through there. And it stops right here at this edge because this here is an N-gon and edge loops only travel through quads. So I'll left click there and drag that down to right there to line up with this vertex. So let me select those two vertices and I'll press J to join them. And you can see where we're going with this. So let's do that again. I'll press Control and R again, left click and drag that down to there. Then I'll select those two vertices and press J. Now we don't have any more issues. It's a little bit low poly down here. We're going to add some more edge loops in, but let me just see what it looks like with Subsurf turned on. So I press Control and up to get out of full screen. I'll turn on visibility of the Subsurf modifier, and everything is looking great. All right, let's add in a couple more edge loops. So I'll press Control and R right through there, left click, and I'll drag that down to there. And I'll do that again and drag one up a little higher. There we go. Very nice. Now it's a little congested up here. I'm going to delete a couple of edge loops to kind of make this bevel just slightly softer. So let's see which ones we will delete. I'm going to hold Alt and right click on that edge loop there. And actually that's a little bit too close to the corner. I think I'm going to leave that alone because it's kind of necessary. So let me hold Alt, right click on that edge loop, and I'll press X and delete the edge loop. And I'll do the same thing with this one over here. And let me hold Alt, right click on that one. I'll press G twice and I'll slide it to the right just a little bit, just to soften the bevel a little. And I'll hold Alt, right click on that edge loop, and I'll press G twice and slide it down a little bit. And let me select this edge loop now. And in order, you can see it's kind of like a sharp angle right there. So I want to soften that out. And the way to do that is we'll slide it to the right and then we'll slide it to the left. And it'll kind of average out its positioning. So I'll press G twice, slide it to the right a little bit, left click to drop it there, and press G twice and slide to the left. You can see how it kind of got softer now. Let me get out of edit mode, make sure everything looks good. And yeah, that looks better to me. Just want to soften things up a little bit. That corner looks good. The bevel looks good. Cool. Now we're actually done with this, so let's throw that into the last layer with our other guide mesh. So I'll press the M key to move it, and move it to the bottom last layer like that. Now let's press Alt and H to bring back our main mesh, and I'll right click on that to select it. And let's change its shrink wrap from guide body, because that's giving us that dent problem. Let's click on that field and change it to guide hood. And we're still having an issue because it's only shrink wrapping the vertex group. So let me press Tab to go into edit mode, select all the vertices this time, go over to the object data buttons and click on assign to assign everything to that vertex group. Let's get out of edit mode and you can see everything looks perfect now. So now this guide mesh or this hood mesh is being shrink wrapped onto the new guide mesh we just made. All right. Now, if you're wondering why we don't just use the higher poly mesh that we just edited as our final mesh, you very well could if you want to, but using the shrink wrap technique allows us to maintain our low poly final mesh that you see here. And that's just better for any further editing we might do. And in this case, we still have to add some thickness, and we still have to add a couple more edge loops. So it's up to you. You can use the higher poly mesh, add some thickness to it and move on, but I'm going to stick with the shrink wrap technique just to kind of drive home the whole technique from start to finish. All right, so when we go to add thickness, we'll be extruding these vertices down, which means we're going to need an extra edge loop around this rim right here. So let me press Control and R, left click there, and drag that down to right there. So that'll give us a nice sharp bevel on that rim there. And just like we've done before, let's spread out these vertices up here. So I'll press B and middle click and drag over all those vertices. We need them to be right where they are. And then with these selected, I'll press G twice and just slide them up a little bit. Oh crap. There we go. Let me slide them back up. All right, let's make sure everything looks good. Yep, reflections are absolutely perfect still. And now we're ready to add some thickness. Now I'm going to take you through step by step. If you want to know exactly why I'm doing everything, all of that's covered in the intro chapters. So I'm in object mode right now and I have the hood selected. So let's go over to the modifiers and I'll add in a solidify modifier to start things off. And let me zoom into the corner down here. Now let's give it a proper thickness. I'm going to go with a thickness of 0.003, which converts to 3 millimeters. And that's a little bit on the thick side for car panels, but when they're a little bit thicker like that, they catch the light a little bit better. So I make them about that size. Now let's go over to the modifier and click on apply. And it's being shrink wrapped up to the top now, so it's overlapping. We're going to need to restore the thickness with another shrink wrap modifier with an offset. So let me tab in, and I need to select the bottom vertices. So let me press Control and R through the center there. Left click and then right click to keep that new edge loop in place. Then I'll press H to hide it. Now let's hover over the bottom vertices and press the L key to select them all. And I'll go over to the object data buttons, remove it from that vertex group. Then I'll add in a new vertex group and assign these vertices to that new group. And let me go over to the modifiers now, and I'll press Alt and H to bring back our other vertices, and let me tab out of edit mode. So right now our bottom vertices are not being shrink wrapped. So that's giving us problems like variation in thickness throughout the rim. You can see it's thicker here than it is over here, and that's something that gets worse with more curvature you have. So it is important to shrink wrap the bottom vertices. It's also important if you want your bottom faces to be visible, because without shrink wrap, we have those creases back and we don't have that perfect curvature we had before. So let me zoom back into our corner and get a good shot of that again. So let's add in another shrink wrap modifier to help us. So I'll just copy this one and then I'll change the vertex group in the top one to group 0.001, which is our bottom vertices. So they're now being shrink wrapped back up to the top, and we can restore the thickness by adding in an offset. So let's enable keep above surface and change the offset to negative 0.003. So now our rim has a consistent thickness all the way around, and we don't have those problems, and the curvature on the bottom is now perfect again. But we still have an issue with the middle edge loop being shrink wrapped up to the top, and that's giving us the overlapping geometry and these black artifacts. So let me tab back into edit mode, and I'll hold Alt and right click on the middle edge loop there, and let's go over to the object data buttons. With the bottom vertex group selected and weight set to 1, I'll click on assign. And let's select the top group now. We'll change the weight to 0.5 and then click on assign for that. And that'll kind of center the roundness of everything. So basically what just happened is the middle edge loop will be shrink wrapped 100% to the bottom first, and then 50% shrink wrapped to the top. So it ends up in the middle and gives us a rounded effect there. And like I said, there's more explanations in the intro chapter on this. Now I want to round things off even further, but before I do that, I need to delete the faces that were created down the middle when we applied the solidify modifier. So let me press numpad 1 for front view, and I'll press A to deselect everything, then I'll press B and left click and drag over all those middle vertices. Then I'll press X and erase the faces. Let me go back to our corner here, and I'll hold Alt, right click on the middle edge loop again, and then I'll press Control and numpad plus sign in order to increase the selection to the surrounding vertices. Now let's hold Alt and Shift, right click on the middle edge loop to deselect it. Now we should have just the top and bottom rims selected on the outside. Now what I'll do is just slide these in. So let me rotate the view like this, and I'll press G twice and I'll slide it up and to the left like that. And sometimes it's a little bit finicky. You have to maybe rotate the view and try sliding it a few times to make sure everything slides in correctly. So that looks pretty good to me. I'll slide it in just a little bit more. All right, that's nicely rounded there now. And let's do the same for the middle since those vertices weren't selected. So for this, I'll just hold Alt, right click on the top edge loop there, then hold Alt and Shift, right click on the bottom. And I'll rotate the view and press G twice and slide them back like that to round it off. Now it gets pretty close to the edge loop over there, which is kind of preventing it from rounding off to its fullest. So let me hold Alt and right click on that edge loop. And that selects all the way up and through like that. So I'll press the C key for circle select, and I'll middle click and drag over those to deselect them. Now let me zoom in. I'll press G twice and slide it that way, just to give it a little bit more room to round off. I'll leave the sides there squared off like they are. Now the panel's pretty much finished. The only thing left to do is delete the bottom faces if you're not showing the bottom side of the hood. It's just going to make things more efficient and render a little bit faster. So let me tab into edit mode. And we need to isolate the bottom vertices. So let me hold Alt, right click on the middle edge loop and press H to hide it. And we'll have to do that for the center as well. So I'll select that edge loop, press H to hide that. And now they're both top and bottom are separated. So we can hover over the bottom vertices and press L. Then I'll just simply press X and erase those faces. I'll press Alt and H to bring back our vertices, tab out, and you'll see we have a perfectly rounded rim still, but a more optimized model since there's no bottom faces. And that pretty much does it for this panel then, and that'll do it for this chapter, so I'll see you in the next one.